Let's go. 86. There we go. Okay, so hopefully, let me know if you can hear me now. If you can hear me clearly now, hopefully you should be able to. Sorry, this is in a rush. I've been out, so I literally just got back in maybe like 5 or 10 minutes ago, and this is going to be the last live for 2021. So just thought I'd jump on really quickly and just spend a little bit of time with you guys. Do let me know if you can. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, TJ. Thanks for letting me know. Gordon, how you doing? Okay, cool. There's a couple of questions in there from Gordon. We can get to that in a moment. GT, how you doing? So, all right, okay. So, as I was saying, I'm going to be signing off for the rest of the year from Friday this week onwards. So, this is going to be my last live on the channel for this year. And I think I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the videos as well over the Christmas and New Year's period. So the next time you're going to see a video from me, it's probably going to be in January now. Because yeah, I've not really had any kind of time off at all this year. It's been literally flat out videos, podcasts, content, and there's quite a lot teed up for the New Year's already, and I think it's just important to kind of just recharge my batteries over the New Year's and Christmas period, basically. So the plan is on Friday, once I finish off, we're supposed to be going to Dubai on Saturday. Fingers crossed there are no travel restrictions, hopefully not. And then we get back in the new year. So there might be, well, there won't be any edited film videos or anything like that until the new year, but there may be a few things that I'll put in the community tab just to keep communication and everything open. All right, so let's just have a look at some questions on here. Gordon's basically just saying, need some clarification on the difference between an ETF and index fund. From what I understand, an ETF price changes through the course of the day. An index fund is set price all day. Yeah, I mean, the main difference is that with an ETF, you have a little bit more flexibility. You can trade out. So let's just say, you wanted to get out at 12 o'clock in the afternoon with an ETF, you'll be able to do that. With an index fund, you'll have to wait until the end of the day. So it's a little bit more flexible in terms of your entry and your exit. It gives you more freedom, gives you more flexibility. Whereas with an index fund, you have to wait until the end of the trading day before you can actually close a position. So it is an important factor to bear in mind. It's one of the reasons why ETFs are kind of a little bit more popular than index funds. Then you obviously bring in the factor of cost as well. ETFs can be better priced than index funds a lot of the time as well. So those probably the main difference. Apologies, guys. It's been a long old day. GT, hope you're well. Is it advisable to pay off all debt first before you invest large sums in the market, or can you or should you pay off your consumer debt and invest monthly? Well, look, the fundamental principle is if you can pay off debt first, purely because the debt is a drain on income, right? So if you've got, credit cards and all this kind of stuff that you're servicing, it's different if it's manageable. If it's manageable, then you're not under financial stress. But if you're under debt where it's causing financial stress, where you're having to really think about where your money is basically going, then it's always advisable to pay off the debt first and then start to invest. Because what that will enable you to do is to invest with real clarity, knowing that you're not going to need that money to pay off X debt, or you're not going to need it for something else a bit later on down the line. So if you can pay off debt first, it's the prudent thing to do. But if you've just got, like, say, for example, a credit card of like £200, for example, or £500, and you know that it is manageable, then that's a different kettle of fish. But if you are kind of like, struggling with debt, we would always say focus on paying down the debt first, and then move on to investing. And the simple fact is that the exercise that you'll go through to actually pay off the debt that should, in theory, start to instill certain habits around sending money somewhere for a certain purpose, so that by the time you've paid off the debt and you come to invest in, that habit to pay off the debt will pay dividends in that habit to actually start investing on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. So if you can pay it off. Hey Simone, how you doing? Let's have a look at Edna's question here. Yeah, thank you for this. Yeah, I need to be fair. The thing is, I like to work, so I'm a little bit of a workaholic, and yeah, it's not necessarily positive a lot of the time, because if I don't work, I don't make any money. I can't keep the lights on. So it's always that balancing act, right, between trying to get a little bit of balance and then working. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on as well for the new year. If you don't follow me on Instagram, we're going to be doing a newsletter in the new year as well. And the newsletter is going to be a very, very good kind of project to work on. And the simple idea behind that is to give you stock news, to give you information on personal finances. There's a feature that I'm also going to be introducing, which will basically have a look at what the professionals are actually investing in currently, so we can see what Warren Buffett bought, or Ray Dalio bought, or any of the big investors. We can see exactly what they bought, issue by issue. And hopefully that will give kind of like a deeper insight. The idea is we'll not use any jargon. It will be just simple, plain English. And we're also going to have within there a jargon buster every issue, so you can improve your financial vocabulary as you start to read the newsletter. It's not going to be a newsletter in the traditional form of a newsletter coming through in like email format. Yes, you're going to get it in email, but it's going to be formatted slightly different. So I'm working on that at the moment. I've got a load of other stuff going on. There's been some crazy meetings and some crazy conversations that have been going on over the last week or two. So all of that is building for 2022, and I'm really excited, but at the same time quite nervous, because a lot of the conversations are just mind blowing more than anything else. So there's a lot on the horizon, and yeah, I just want to be able to take a little bit of time off before I start with that chaos next year. And obviously still doing 2 videos a week on here, doing live Q&As on here, still keeping up with the podcast, still doing, because I'm going to be part of a Channel 4 show, filming a Channel 4 show, everything else that comes alongside that as well. Then the other conversations that I've been having, there's a lot. So it's really important that I kind of get my head down and just relax for a couple of weeks. When can we take profits from investments? Any suggestions on the proper ways of doing this? It's really down to you. So listen, if you are investing and I think this is a question, I think you messaged me on this as well, Edna. If you're buying individual stocks, and this is particularly pertinent if you're buying individual stocks, if you're buying individual stocks in a small number of companies, and you've invested, say, £10,000, you may want to, at the point where you start to invest in these things, start to say to yourself, or you should be saying to yourself, right, okay, if I get a return of 50% or 30%, whatever that number might be for you, you're going to have a look at it from a pragmatic point of view and decide whether or not you want to take profits at that point, because obviously individual stocks are going to be very, very volatile. You're never going to catch an individual stock where it's constantly on the upward trajectory, right? So when you take profits, should be informed by your train of thought, your research, and your plan when you bought said individual stock. Like, people don't often think about this kind of stuff. It's very, very important. You don't want to be investing money, have a gain of 20 grand, right, on, say, I don't know, 40 grand, for example, that you already invested, right? So you've got 50% return, and then not think about taking profits when you can. This is particularly pertinent if you are investing in individual stocks. If you're investing in ETFs, index funds, it doesn't really matter so much because yes, you're going to see some volatility within the fund, but it's not going to be anywhere near the same level of volatility that you will see if you're holding, say, for example, Tesla, or if you're holding, for example, Rivian. It's not going to be the same level of volatility because you've got a basket of companies which are diverse and well mixed. So you're going to have some blue chip companies in there, you'll have some growth companies in there, you have some tech companies in there, energy, financials. You're going to have companies across different sectors and hopefully across different geographical regions. Like investing is all about risk management. So the whole point of taking profit when you can is to reduce your downside risks. If you've got a 50% kind of like return over a period of time, taking some of that off the table so that you've got your profit, you're mitigating and minimizing your risk as much as possible, but you're also giving yourself the opportunity to have a pot of cash available, knowing that things are going to be volatile, that when you identify, for example, right, okay, if said stock were to go from, I don't say, from $100 or £100 per share to something like £80 per share, I wouldn't mind getting back in and buying a little bit more of this. So you're holding money aside to go back in at a lower price point. But again, this is pertinent if you are investing in individual stocks, and you must have had a train of thought around your goal, your plan, and how this feeds into your strategy. If you haven't got that, then you'll be taking profits for taking profit's sake. So it's really, really important that it has to fit within your strategy and fit within your plan. There are no proper ways of doing it. You literally just look at your holding and you part of your holdings into cash. That's how you would do it, generally speaking. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really important, especially with volatile markets at the moment and the whole fear of inflation. I will be doing a video on Tuesday around this, how to beat inflation in if you're looking at investing, and maybe some of the things to kind of invest in. I did allude to that this past week when I said blue chip stocks, but what else can you actually do? So I'll be doing a video on that as well. Gordon's just saying here, in practice, why is that important? So this is the ability to trade in and out. Well, look, mate, if you, for example, if you're self-investing, so you're DIY investing, you're managing all of this yourself, and let's just say you look at the markets one day and God forbid, everything is just tanking. It's tanking 50%, 60% minus, 20% minus, right? Now, with an index fund, you can do nothing. If you feel obliged, compelled to sell some of your investments with an index fund, you couldn't do it until the end of the trading day, which means that you would have had the entire downward spiral that day and been able to do nothing. With an ETF, if you notice this at, say, I don't know, 10 a.m., you monitored it, and maybe you had like risk tolerances built in saying, okay, well, actually, you know what? If any of my holdings or if my money falls from anywhere between 10, 15, 20%, I need to take a real good look at it. And you're proactive to the point where you are paying attention to it. With an ETF, if you notice it at 10 o'clock and you're monitoring through the next couple of hours to 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, if you then decided, actually, you know what, it's hit my limits, I'm going to sell, you can do that with an ETF. With an index fund, you can't. You've got to wait until the end of that trading day before you can actually close your position. So the flexibility is just to give you the ability to move if you wanted to, as long as a stock market is open. So if you're buying, for example, an ETF which is traded on the London Stock Exchange, as long as the London Stock Exchange is open, you'll be able to get out your position. If it's in the US, as long as the US markets are open, you'll be able to get out your position. So it is all about the ability, the flexibility that it gives you to be able to make choices. If you were investing with a professional investment house, they will have 10% losses. Like, so for example, if any of their holdings lose a 10% in valuation, that triggers an event. that triggers investment managers, professionals who are looking after the portfolio, if you're in an actively managed proposition, to start looking at it. And they have to then send you a letter to tell you, on this day, we saw a drop in the market greater than 10%. This is what we're doing about it. So it's all about risk management at the end of the day. And if you are investing on your own, you need to have that on your radar, right? What happens if the markets were to go 15, 20%? Now, some people will say, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to be investing for the 20, 25 odd years. It doesn't matter to me. If that is the case, fantastic. Leave it, let it ride. But there are a lot of people who are investing who will look at it and say, actually, I want to be more hands-on. I want to take steps to make sure that I'm on top of things all the time. If that is you, then an ETF would really, really help in that regard, in being able to make those decisions and make those choices during the trading day, as opposed to waiting towards the end of the day for that to happen. Emmanuel, how's it going? Lynn, I don't get this question. Let me just have a look. Oh, here we go. Stamp duty on property. Is there a way you can reduce stamp duty on a second property? No, not that I know of. That's the whole point of the stamp duty. If you're buying a second property, you've got to pay the stamp duty on it. They did it as a deterrent, really, to put people off acquiring second properties as investment properties, because the reality is, as an investor, you are buying that when a first-time buyer could possibly have had it. So because you already have one property and you're acquiring another one, well, you've got to pay the tax, because ideally what the government would like is to have that property that you're buying as a second property go to a first time buyer. So it was there as for that reason, but there isn't a way that I know of where you can save or reduce stamp duty on a second property. Do you trade the New York Stock Exchange or UK markets? Are you long-term investment? I'm a long-term investor. I do not trade. That's not my gig. Trading is a completely different skill set. Very, very different to investing. I'm a long-term investor. I buy and hold stuff for the long term. Ivan, if you have 1,000 for retirement every month, how do you personally would you invest in percentage? Right, okay. So let me just get this right. If you have £1,000 for retirement every month, how would I personally invest in percentage between LISA, ISA, and SIP? Look, if I answer that and I give you my personal view, it's my personal view. I would put it into a SIP personally, because more tax relief. I'll probably be able to keep my charges lower in a pension that I would be able to within a lifetime ISA or an ISA, arguably, depending on what you go into. But I would put it into a SIP or personal pension. Maybe not a SIP, but a personal pension. I would put it into a personal pension personally. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the right thing for you to do. It depends on your circumstances, depends on whether you're going to need access to the money, depends whether you're buying a property at some point, whether you actually really need it for retirement. If I was employed in a business, I would be definitely making sure that I was speaking to my employer about giving me or trying to match my contribution if I'm contributing £1,000 over and above what I'm already contributing as the compulsory minimums under auto enrollment. Because at the end of the day, you're going after free money, asking and getting free money. So it's a no-brainer. If you're self-employed, though, then that's a completely different matter. But if you put it into a SIP or a personal pension via your business, it's a business expense. It can help you reduce your corporation tax. So for me, pension. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the right thing for you. It really depends on your circumstances. One sec, guys. Okay. What's the best way to reduce tax liability for higher rate taxpayers? Depends what liability you're referring to. You're talking about income tax. What are you referring to exactly? Stamp duty you can't get round at the end of the day. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, and you want to reduce your tax, your income tax, well, then you can there's a ton of things you can do. You can pay into a pension, so you've got more money going into your pension before tax is paid out, which will help, which will reduce it. Salary sacrifice, that kind of thing. But it really depends on what your circumstances is. It's hard to give you a specific answer without knowing where you are on the spectrum and what you're effectively facing. What are the key points I look at when looking to invest in individual stocks? It's all about what the business basically does, their product, their service, what problem they're solving. The management team is really important to me. Um, Whether they have any advantages over their competitors within a space. Those are the main things. And then obviously, a good look at, okay, from a financial point of view, what does the snapshot of this company actually look like? I mean, if you're going to be looking at companies, for example, that are new budding companies, Rivian will be a prime example. They've not really made any money at all. So to look at their financials, um, won't tell the full story. And financial statements never really do. They never tell the full story, particularly if it's a new company or a new business in a new sector trying to be groundbreaking. The financials are never going to tell you the things that you need. But what you do need to pay attention to is what they're selling, how they're going to sell it, what competitive advantages do they actually have? Do they have a team, a structured team that can actually take them from where they are right now to where they want to be in the future? How are they sourcing funding? How efficient are they? Are they actually running in terms of in terms of the financials behind it? So are they raising 100 million quid and blowing through that in 6 months? What efficiencies are they going to need to introduce to build in order to make sure that ultimately they're going to be able to turn a profit? Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. How are they going to be able to do that? Do they have the experienced management team to be able to do those things? It can be quite in depth. If you're looking at a large established company, then balance sheet really does become important. Understanding, what do their financials actually say? Do they have good increase in revenues on a year to year basis? Are they spending more and more to be able to market their product? If they are, why is that being translated in terms of revenues? What is their profit margin? Are they making a load of money, advertising, spending a lot of money in terms of the cost of doing business, but then their profit margins are razor thin? Those are really, really key indicators. Are they paying dividends or not? If they are, great. If they're not, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But why are they not paying dividends? Are they reinvesting money into the business? There are numerous things to have a look at. And when you're trying to pick individual stocks, the worst thing you can do, well, a couple of things that you could do that you should never really do, is go and buy an individual stock just because the share price looks cheap. Like, oh, it's £10 a stock. So if I go and put £1,000, I'm going to get X amount of shares from it. That's a terrible way to go shopping and buying individual stocks. You need to look at the substance of the company first and foremost. That is the most important thing. And if you are going to be looking at, companies that are well established, companies that will basically and hopefully stay the tide of inflation and economic pressures, recessions, so on and so forth. If you're looking for those kind of companies, balance sheet, financials are absolutely crucial. Companies with efficiencies, companies that, if anything were to happen, they have the ability to do something that won't necessarily impact the share price or the bottom line, profit being the most important metric of all. There are lots and lots and lots of things to have a look at. And you do kind of need to know how you're going to prioritize those things based on your goals, based on your strategy. And if you are going to be researching the companies, how you actually go about researching those companies and collating a list of companies that meet your strategy, your goal, your plan. It's really, really important that you do the due diligence for it, essentially. Good question here. Is life insurance necessary if you don't have kids? Good question. It depends on your circumstances again, because if you don't have any family, like no kids, no brothers, mom, dad, uncles, aunts, nobody at all that you would potentially want to leave money to, or potentially give a helping hand to, leave a legacy to, then maybe you don't need it. Maybe you don't need it at all. But I would say that if you do have, family members that you care about, for example, you might have, cousins, nephews, nieces, you might be a godparent, then maybe life insurance would be good for you, because ultimately, you might want to leave something. And this is something, we people on the internet talk a lot about, wealth generation, right? Intergenerational wealth. It was a buzzword for like a large part of like last year and the year before, certainly on Instagram. Intergenerational wealth. And people have this stupid notion that it has to be that you've built a business and you've sold a business and all this nonsense. Like, it is the biggest load of BS ever, ever. Like, if you want to have like everybody can have intergenerational wealth to leave tomorrow if they die tomorrow, if they just had a life insurance policy. Very, very simple. You don't have to build a business. You don't have to have money passed down to you. You could be from a very, very poor background and be able to have intergenerational wealth that you could pass down tomorrow by simply buying a life insurance product. Because one thing is for sure, you are going to die at some point, and that is as morbid as it comes, right? But it's true. Everybody's going to die. So if you are going to die and you have loved ones that you would like to help out from a financial point of view, that you want to leave wealth to, take out a life insurance policy. The amount is down to you: 100 grand, 50 grand, 500 grand. Take out a policy for 10 million if you wanted to, if you could afford the monthly premium. But that's how you can basically have intergenerational wealth to pass down to people that you care about. You don't have to build a business necessary to do so. But I would definitely say, if you've got like mortgages, that kind of stuff, you kind of do need something, definitely, regardless of whether, well, maybe not if you've got kids and you haven't got family and stuff, it's going to be irrelevant. But if you do have family and people that you want to leave the house to, for example, then yeah, you should have it, but it's not compulsory. It really is about personal preference. I know some people, I've sat down with clients and they don't want to have that conversation about life insurance at all. Like, no, I'm not leaving my kids anything. I'm not leaving anything to anybody because I didn't get a helping hand. And that's each to their own. But if you're the kind of person that wants to be able to like leave something to people, then life insurance is great. There's another one here. Is fixing a mortgage longer than 5 years sensible/risky? Um, it depends how you look at it. It really does depend how you look at it. It depends on whether you want the comfort and the ability to be able to plan from a monthly basis what your expenditure is going to be. If you're quite happy with the potential possibility that your mortgage price could increase if interest rates increase, then by all means, don't fix it. But fixing will give you that sense of security. My mortgage is going to be £500 every single month for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I mean, they are releasing 40-year fixed rate mortgages. I did a video about that maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. That's a new product. And the whole purpose of the 40-year mortgage is to be able to get people to lock into lower rates or into a rate that will be protected against interest rate rises in the future, that will keep your mortgage payment steady through that entire period of time. However, here in the UK, they do this in the States, by the way. They're used to taking out 25, 30-year fixed rate mortgages. We don't do it here in the UK. We will fix for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, most of the time being the longest, most times, typically. And then we will remortgage. And the reason why we've done that is because historically, our interest rates have been extremely high. If you go back to the 70s, right, interest rates were 15%. They were ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And what we've seen is interest rates creep down over, 2, 3 decades. And because of that notion and that dynamic of interest rates falling on a periodic basis and maybe increasing, we've become accustomed to remortgaging every 2 or 3 years, 5 years, because the interest rate may have changed. That's very, very different to where we are right now, where interest rates are literally rock bottom. We are at the lowest interest rates ever in history. So now what we know is they can't go any lower. They will go up higher. And because of this conversation, these fears about inflation, we know that they're going to increase next year. A 40-year or fixing into a mortgage of a longer term makes sense, because unlike the last, 20 to 30 years where things have come down and we've taken advantage of that, we are now facing the opposite, where interest rates are so low, and over the next 10, 15 years, they can only go one way, which is up. So the idea of fixing for the longer term, past 5 years, it can be sensible if you want to really rein in your spending and plan for your finances from a potential point of view. There is risk involved in it. The risk is, well, actually, what happens if rates do fall even further, which is near enough of impossibility right now. They have to go up. But the risk that you're going to have is if you go and sign yourself into a 10-year fixed rate mortgage, a 15-year, 20-year, 25-year fixed rate mortgage, you're likely going to have penalties. And that's something that I highlighted in that video right there, which is, I'm sure at the minute, around the 40%, 40-year fixed rate mortgages which are coming online at the moment. Is we don't know the detail of what the penalties are going to be in order for you to be able to get out of that contract. That's the risk that you're going to face potentially with it. But it can be a great tool to help you be able to plan your finances, to know that you've got security and knowing that your mortgage payments will not go up over the longer term, be that 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is that you basically choose. All right, okay. If you don't use all of your money in a LISA to purchase a house, would the LISA amount remain active as a retirement fund? Yes. So if you only use a proportion of it to buy your house, then yes, the remaining will be active as a retirement fund, if you will. So yeah, you can continue to pay into that, and obviously, get the benefit that the government gives you, that 25% bonus for purposes of retirement. This is a really interesting question. Do you think physical appearance has a bearing on earning potential? You know what? I really think that depends on whether you are, what industry you work in, and the kind of people that you interact with. And certainly if you're a male or female, um, I think as human beings, it's how can I say this in the right way so it comes across in the way that I actually intend it? When I was working in Canary Wharf, if I think about some of the guys that and girls that work in the office, all very, very good looking people, all of them. I mean, you would think it was like a freaking catwalk a lot of the time. Really, really good looking people. And whilst that shouldn't be a factor, I think it's just simple human nature that people are drawn to good looking people. If you look a certain way, if you look the part, look in the part, certainly in financial services, is a big, big thing, particularly in wealth management. It's huge. Look in the part is huge. And when I say look in the part, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to be good looking as a person, but you certainly have to rock up, look in the part. So looking professional, looking like you know what you're talking about, and obviously having the substance and the knowledge and the experience to be able to back that up. So I think it does help. I would like to think that it doesn't in most cases. I mean, I say this, and like, if you look at, I'm going to be doing more media stuff, right, in the new year. And, one of the things that they say is it's show business. It helps to be good looking or to have a certain look, because it will appeal to certain types of people within the general world that you're broadcasting to, you know, and that's why when you look at films and movies and entertainment in general, it's generally all good looking people. They look the part, they look after themselves and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean that it's fair, because looks are a thing. Looks are, to a certain extent, uh, a trait that we don't actually have control over. Like, it's a lottery, you know, and as much as it shouldn't, unfortunately, it does actually help within professional world. Um, but yeah, I mean, you may think differently. What do you think, Lynn? GT always reminds people about this. Actually, let me just, because I've been in a rush, literally, to get on here this evening. I have no idea. Um, I have no idea what likes we've actually got. We've got 24 likes right now. So, guys, if we can, let's get that up to maybe like 35 or something like that. There's 64 people on here at the moment. So, appreciate every single one of you. Well, let's have a look at this one. This is a really good question as well. Did you make any mistakes at the beginning of your investing career? I had a lot of help um, at the beginning of my investing career. Like, I've been in financial services for 15, 16 years. So I've been surrounded by this stuff for a very, very, very long time. And it's more kind of like watching what people are doing. And as I studied for my exams and understood kind of how investments kind of work and how advice and everything works, watching people give advice, sitting on our meetings around the advice and understanding the rationale. Like, people look at financial advisors and wonder what financial advisors do. Financial advisors are very methodical because they have to be. They have to be very, very methodical around anything that is recommended as an investment solution. So the steps that they have to go through, the compliance checks that they have to go through, everything is examined with a fine tooth comb, because if they get anything wrong, the liability sits with them. And so that methodology of being right, doing the due diligence, making sure that you're checking all the boxes, the rights, the pros, and the cons. I've been watching that for years and years and years, even when I wasn't advising, when I was sitting in as a consultant with advisors and clients, talking about how the company that I work for and our product and our service fitted that entire investment vehicle. I've been watching all of that. So understanding how it all works basically meant that I didn't really make any mistakes at all when I first started, because generally speaking, the fundamentals are very simple. If you really want to invest and manage your risk, because let's think about the things that you could get wrong and the consequences, you lose money. So if I'm in an environment where I'm with financial advisors, I train to be a financial advisor, take the exams, and at the forefront of our mind, the first thing we try to mitigate and manage is risk, not return. Risk first. We're mitigating and analyzing the risk that we're willing to take in order to get returns. We're always trying to look at the downside first. And that basically means that index funds, ETFs, if you're going to be picking individual stocks and creating a portfolio of your own, is that due diligence around the research. So I can't say that there were a lot of mistakes that I made purely because I had the luxury of being in the industry and being around like really brilliant people and really brilliant minds who I watched and had conversations with almost on a daily basis around how the investment markets work. And I guess that's given me a lot of it's given me a bit of an advantage, if I'm fair, because my experience is from being a first time investor, learning things off the internet or reading books. It didn't come that way. It's because I've been in the industry and I've been around this for such a long time. And having these kind of conversations are second nature to me because I've been in it for so long. For first time investors, you have to go on a learning curve. My learning curve was taking literally working in the industry, working with brilliant people. And many thanks for answering the question, Peter. And sounds amazing, the projects you will be doing. Keep my eyes and ears open. Thank you, Edna. Let's have a look. Yeah, you're saying you only have index funds. If you've got index funds, look, if you've got index funds, you're going to be very, very well diversified. You'll have risk management built in there anyway. Yes, you're going to see a little bit of volatility within the performance of the index fund, but overall, you're not going to see anywhere near the kind of sways that you would see if you had like a basket of individual stocks where you maybe only had maybe 10, 20, 25 of them. you're not going to see that level of volatility. And it just means that you're going to be adequately diversified. So what is a reasonable level of income for a comfortable retirement in London? That's a very good question. There was a survey. I did a video on this maybe like 2 months ago. This was about comfortable levels of income. And it depends on, there were three thresholds that they basically put in this article. I can't remember the numbers off by head right now, but there were three levels of kind of like income requirements for a certain level of lifestyle. So the first one was like literally just basic. You can pay your bills, you can eat food. That's pretty much it, right? That wasn't a lot at all. I think that was something in the region of around, and this is not specific to London, by the way, this was a national thing that they did. I think that was something in the region of around, I think it was between 17 and 20,000 pounds or something like that. Then there was a step up, which was you can keep the lights open, you keep the lights on, you can eat food, and you might be able to go on like a European like holiday once a year. That was in the region, I believe it was between 23 and 25K. And then there was, right, okay, so you've worked all your life, you've had a really good sort of earnings whilst you were working, and you want to retire in relative comfort, right? So luxury. So keeping the lights on, you can go on a holiday a couple of times a year, and you can also drive a pretty decent car. That was in the region of about 40K. But again, that is not specific to London in itself. These kind of numbers, it's okay taking a national poll to say, right, this is what we think you might actually need. The reality is there are so many other factors that impact that income amount and what you would need personally. Inflation obviously comes into it. Things like, do you have a mortgage when you retire? Are you mortgage free? Are you still renting? Council tax, what are you paying in council tax? Your electric, your gas bills, all those kind of things come into it. Whether you have a state pension or not, what size of pension you actually have, workplace or private pension. All of these things culminate into this cauldron of factors that you need to be able to analyze and make a determination upon, right? Because your reality is going to be very, very different if you still got to be worried about paying rent than if you've worked all your life, you've got on the property ladder, and you've paid off your mortgage. Because the mortgage is often people's biggest monthly expenditure. So if you haven't got to worry about that, then you're in a completely different ballpark. If you've worked and you have entitlement to full state pension, providing it's still going to be around when you actually retire, well, all of a sudden, that's £9,300 that you got coming in from the government, which is guaranteed. If that's a couple, you times that by two, that's 18 grand. So personal circumstances really do come into it. It really depends on, what is your circumstance overall? What do you actually need to survive? And this is one thing that I always, if I'm doing coaching with people, I always try and get people to kind of think ahead and look at their expenses right now and say, okay, so if you fast forward, and let's just say you didn't have your mortgage, right? Let's take that out. Let's just assume that your cost of electricity goes up to this amount each year, and your cost of food and all this kind of stuff goes up from here to here. That's a number. We can then say, okay, so for this number, what do you need to have within an investment or a pension of some kind to get you that income? That way, you're able to fast forward into the future, put a sand, like a marker in the sand, and then you're able to work backwards to what you should be doing now in order to get yourself in a position where you have a lump sum available in a pension or in other investment forums or forms to be able to give you an income that you need in the future. So it really depends. But things in London are extremely expensive. So your situation will be very, very different to someone who maybe lives in like the countryside, like I do up here in Shropshire. Very, very different. They would need probably half of what you would require, or maybe even three-quarters of what you would require. So if those are kind of the things that you want to get a sense of, definitely try and run some of those exercises. Try and think about your expenditure right now, and take out things of I do have a mortgage, so you're still going to be paying rent. If not, take those things out and then try and factor in a little bit of inflation into your gas, electric, your council tax, and all that kind of stuff, and that will give you a number and it'll give you something to work towards. This is a good one. What do you think about Dave Ramsey? Can you make a video about the baby steps UK version? I think it's very popular and interesting. You know what? I do follow a little bit of Dave Ramsey. I think he's a little old school though. Sometimes I think that his approach can be very, very extreme, and it works for some people. I remember I watched one of his clips, and because obviously he has a show, right, where people phone in and basically say, this is my situation and stuff. And I remember he was talking to this young couple. I think they were in like their late 20s, coming up to 30s or something like that, right? And they've been to university, and obviously education out in the United States is freaking ridiculous, right? So I think the debt that they had altogether was ridiculous. It was in the millions, right? And they weren't even 30. And I remember him being like, dude, I'm getting ready to completely wreck your financial life. Period. You're not going to be able to buy anything but noodles. Like, I'm going to take you to like, you're going to hate it. And I think that approach works for some people. And I think if you are in debt at 30 for like a million plus, then yeah, you need that extreme kind of like approach. But at the same time, the reason why I struggle with that is because first and foremost, you need balance. And balance is so, so important. And oftentimes when I coach people, they're nervous around what do I need to change and how extreme and how far is it going to go. In some cases, it will warrant it. But in most cases, if you make it too painful, too stretching, people lose the motivation to continue to do or continue on the path that you've set them on, even though they know that it's going to get them to a better place. It's just too painful. You lose motivation. And therefore, when you lose motivation, you just lose the will to carry on doing this. So I think balance is very, very important. And whilst he's very, very straight, he's quite old school. I think that his approach could be a little bit brought into the modern era because, look, people face very, very different challenges these days. Like they really, really do. And understanding the correlation between financial troubles and mental health, financial well-being and mental health is really important. That's a factor that if you go back, 20, 30 odd years ago, nobody cared about that kind of stuff. It's like, you do this or that's it. You need to consider those kind of things now. So he's good, but I do think that, it can be brought up to date and made a little bit more relevant to where we are right now, because balance is important and you have to kind of help with that mental health side of things. You don't want to put people on a financial path that is negatively going to impact their mental health or their sense of well-being. Those two things need to go hand in hand. That's why my slogan is money is a tool, life is for living. Money should not be anything but a tool to help you live the life that you want. The minute it becomes a hindrance or a burden to that, that's when we're in trouble. That's when there are issues, and that needs to be looked at. If you have 15K, where can you invest to get high returns on investments? Depends what you mean by high returns. But look, there are tons and tons and tons of places you can put 15K. You smash it into an ISA first and foremost, and you pick an index fund or an ETF of your choice. S&P 500, for example, may be a really, really good one. You can go into emerging markets if you wanted to, but you're going to have some risk in there. You could go into a globally diversified ETF or index fund. That will be a little bit more balanced and managed in terms of the risk and diversification that you have. But ISA first and foremost, 15K. You'll use majority of your tax allowance for the year, and then you literally just put it in there. What you mean by high returns? I mean, high returns is subjective, right? Many people will think that 5% is a high return. Many people will think 10% is a high return. Really depends on what you mean. So, but yeah, index fund, ETF of some kind, put it into an ISA because you're not going to pay any tax on it. That's what I would do. That doesn't mean that you should go and do that, but that hopefully gives you somewhere to start at least. How did you manage to quit your job and work full time for yourself? So January is going to be 3 years. It's flown by. It's absolutely crazy. January is going to be the beginning of the third year for Conversation of Money as a YouTube channel and as a podcast. So um, I've got 16 years in the industry now. I was advising, went to a discretionary fund manager, really, really big discretionary fund manager. I was working there as one of their executives there. And then I got headhunted at the end of 2000 and where are we right now? We're 2019, I'll get headhunted to go to a different company to head up a national project. So I left the DFM, went to the new company in the January of 2020. I started the YouTube channel and the podcast because I had this, I don't know, it was this niggling thing in the back of my mind that, dude, you need to do YouTube and you need to start your podcast this year. Do not procrastinate. And I bit the bullet and did it. And thankfully, I did. So I started that job in January, national project. We were building something really freaking awesome for this company. Then obviously, COVID came in. So when COVID came in, purely because the project was about getting people into rooms, it was all about financial education, it was about interaction, it was all about um, improving people's understanding of financial planning, of investments, how to practically use that in conjunction with the company that I was working with. That basically meant that we couldn't have events, and therefore I got made redundant from that job literally 2.5 months into it. Now, thankfully, I started the podcast and the YouTube channel in the January. And as I got made redundant from there, I looked at it and said, you know what? I've always wanted to do YouTube and at least put my voice out there, my thoughts out there around investing and some of the things that I wish that I knew when I was 25 that I know because I'm in the industry. And I looked at the situation. I looked at kind of what money I had lying around. I had a really healthy emergency fund. And I just thought, you know what? Now's the time to do it, if anything. And I've been pushing it ever since then, really, to be honest. And that's how I get to this point where now, um, yeah, I'm working full time on this uh, on my own, and it's crazy, mate. It really, really is. I mean, the growth in the channel through the first part of 2020, it felt like forever to get to 1,000 subscribers. It took me like 6 months to get to 1,000 subscribers. It was painful, really, really painful, because obviously to monetize YouTube, and I did a video beginning of this year where I talked about how much I've earned on YouTube from AdSense, which is just from people watching my videos and having the ads running my videos. I made a video about that. AdSense doesn't generate a lot of money. It doesn't, unless you're getting, 15, 20, 40, 50,000 views on a video at any one time. Then you're really kind of like, you're trundling at that point. I mean, at that point, you're getting anywhere between 5 to 10 grand just on AdSense alone. It's insane if you can get to that point. The reality is, I only probably get on average 1,000, maybe 2,000 views per video that I put out. I put out a lot of videos. I could get way more views, but I don't want to create the types of videos that get those types of views. They're mainly hype, 10x stock, what stock to buy. That would not sit well with my core and my background, because even now when I answer questions on here, in my mind, I'm thinking, right, if someone goes and copies what I say right now and they lose money, then potentially I'm responsible for that. So I want to take a responsible approach to that. But, the only way that this channel is sustainable is through brand partnerships that I do here and there through on the channel. And affiliate links. Those are the two main things. I do coaching one-on-one with people. So that's been a good part for me this year. I've got my investment course, which I don't talk anywhere near enough about, because every time I mention it, people will get in the comment section and start to slate me. And it's like, I don't like negative energy. There's a lot of stuff I could push a whole lot more than I do. But that's what keeps the channel basically going. And thankfully, this is going to be the end of the second year now. Um, Channel 4 and media work has come because of YouTube. So I'm excited about 2022 and see where it's going to go from here, to be fair. But yeah, that's how I managed to quit my job and do this full time. Trust me, it's a risk. It really is. It was a risk at the time. If I didn't have an emergency fund or didn't have money set aside, there'll be nowhere that I would have been able to do this, which is why, everything that I talk about, I pretty much do myself. I may not show that a lot of the time because I think people like to show investment portfolio values and this is what I've got and this is what I've got. I could definitely do that if I wanted to, but I think if I show my portfolio and someone else goes and copies that portfolio may not be right for you. And I just have a sense of, like, I guess, responsibility in the fact that I am from the financial services industry. I know what compliance is all about. I know what would happen if the FCA, God forbid, gets into the YouTube space and says, you know what, we're going to start looking at what each and every single one of these channels is doing. Because if that ever happens, there'll be a load of accounts and a load of creators on YouTube that you don't even want to know what the FCA could do. Fines, prison sentences, all kinds of stuff. Because there's a lot of shenanigans that happens here on social media. It is ridiculous. And if the authorities ever got onto this, the regulators ever got onto this, there'll be a lot of people with a lot of penance to pay. And for everything that I do, want to always be able to protect myself so that I can say that with whatever I've said, I've always said it with the right intentions. Whatever collaborations I've ever done on the channel, I've done with the right intentions to help people and not lead people on due to hyperbole around, oh, this stock is booming right now, or this thing is the in thing right now. I try to stay away from all of that kind of stuff. There's no tax on an ISA. There is no tax on an ISA. So if you have an ISA account, the government allows you to save £20,000 or invest £20,000 every single tax year, completely tax free. And as long as you have your money within that ISA account, it will always be tax free, including any income you draw from that ISA as well. So, for example, your tax year begins April the 6th to April the 5th every year. When the new tax year rolls in, so, April the 6th, 2021 to April the 6th, 2022, that's one tax year. I can put 20 grand in. Come April the 6th, 2022 to April the 5th, 2023, that's another tax year. I can put another 20K in. So if I do that every single year, and I'm lucky enough to do 20 grand for 5 years, that's 100 grand. If that's invested in the stock market and you're getting a 10% return every single year, compounded, you're now in excess of £150,000 potentially in an ISA account. That is completely tax free. If at some point you then said, I want to take an income from that £150,000, that will also be tax free because it's coming from an ISA account. Literally, ISAs alongside pensions are the greatest gifts that we have as financial instruments in this country. And this is the stuff that they should be teaching people in school, but they don't. And that's why I do what I do here on YouTube. Swift Aim. So I've just looked at a pension with Money Farm, and it looks like it gives much better returns than my standard life pension, both at risk 6 and 7. What might this be? So with Money Farm, you would have gone through a questionnaire to get to that point, right? Or have you just gone to their website and you can choose the portfolios at 6 and 7? One thing I would definitely compare, you need to make sure that the cost with Standard Life is comparable to the one with Money Farm. They will manage and invest in different things as well. So on Money Farm, you will be able to see how their portfolio is basically built. 1 second. I'm just going to see if I can actually pull something up here, and I might be able to show you on the screen. But if you haven't gone through the actual questionnaire with Money Farm, where they put you within a band of portfolios to potentially invest in, then you need to go through that step, mate, just to be sure. And what I would do is, right, let me just bring this up. Let me just find the site. 1 second. All right, where are we going? Where is it? 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 Oh, here we go. Right. Can I share this? Let me make sure I've got this right in terms of the proportions. There we go. All right, let me just hide this quickly. All right, so if you've gone on Money Farm, basically, right, and you've gone on to these here right here, and you've then looked at this return, for example, right? So this is their portfolio six. So over the last what's this, since 2016, so 5 years, they returned 65.8%, which is an annual average of 9%, right? Their competitors have done about 51.1%. So what you want to be doing is, if you're looking at this in comparison to Standard Life, you want to make sure that you're comparing over exact dates. Exact dates. Now, how you would do that is try and get your Standard Life performance for the last 4 or 5 years. Try and get it down to a date, and then try and make sure that you're able to match that here. But one thing you do need to bear in mind, like six, that's pretty high risk. So if you haven't gone through the questionnaire, once you've answered all their questions, will tell you that you fall within the band of maybe a 4, 5, or 6, essentially. Now you can go 7, because my portfolio with them is in a 7, essentially. And that one's done 82.3% since 2016 over a 5-year period. But if I'm comparing this to Standard Life, one of the things that you definitely want to do is you want to go and have a look at this right here. So you kind of want to get a breakdown of what it's actually invested in. So you can go here. Actually, I'm sure that they showed you more of what this actually invested in, actual instruments, because they will use ETFs. So it'll be good for you to see, right, what are they invested in ETF wise? So you can do a comparison between that and Standard Life, and then you want to compare the cost as well. So how much are these guys going to cost you on a monthly or yearly basis versus what you're paying now with Standard Life? You definitely need to cover those two boxes before you take the choice of actually transferring over to them. Just spend a little time doing that due diligence with it, just to be sure. But Money Farm are really, really good. The performance that they've managed to get from me is really, really good. I haven't looked at it recently since the last video that I made. I think it was something, I don't know. I think it might have been like 12% or something like that. Let me just go into it now. I can't remember what the numbers were on the last video that I made, but they're very, very good. You can speak to somebody, you can book an appointment with them. I think it was 10%. It was 10% that they did for me. At the moment, they've done so. The portfolio is up since the last video, because I remember the video title was 10% year to date. They're up since that video, 13.68%. And I've only been with them since February this year. So it's actively managed. They are pulling levers. They're making decisions on the go. So yeah, just make sure you do that comparison, mate, just to make sure you're going to be happy with it entirely. Signed up with free trade for shares ISA to find they don't have lots of the stocks I want. Other platforms would you recommend? Yeah, because with free trade, they've also got obviously the paywall. So if I think you've got to pay like $9.99, something like that, to get access to the full range of stocks that they have on the books. They have to monetize their output, don't they? And I know they recently raised money, so they got investors. They need to obviously give a return to their investors and stuff. So if you're going to be looking at investing UK and US markets, if you're looking at US markets alone exclusively, then maybe stake. If you look at the comment section for any of my videos, there will be a stake link. If you use that, you'll get a free stock with them, either in Dropbox, Nike, or GoPro. So you can use that link for stake. But they US special have access to the UK markets. If you're UK markets, I was going to say Trading 212, but they're not opening accounts. They haven't done this entire year. So that would only leave you with companies like, if you're looking at, I'm guessing you're looking at individual stocks here. Maybe Orca. actually Orca only has UK stocks, not US stocks. So that you could use in conjunction with Stake for the UK market specifically. Other than that, eToro, eToro would be another one that you could use for individual stocks. If you're after ETFs, though, the likes of the Invest Engine, just go and check out Invest Engine. Very, very low cost, even lower cost than Vanguard sometimes, a lot of the times, because you haven't got the platform fee with Vanguard to pay if you use Invest Engine. But that's if you're looking to use ETFs. Have like a multitude of ETFs, but they are adding more and more and more pretty much every single week. But the existing um, pool of ETFs that they have, I think, covers something like 6,000 companies. So they do have an extensive range. But there are links in all of my videos to Invest Engine, to eToro, to Stake. If you do go down the route of Invest Engine, they give you 50 quid to try them. So you get 350 quid straight away just by using the link in any one of my videos. You'll get a free share with Stake. Orca, I don't think they're offering anything at all, and I don't have a link for them. But those are three that you could try potentially. I invest in the S&P 500 with Vanguard to take advantage of the compound interest, so I constantly have to be selling my gains and reinvesting them. No, you don't. You don't have to do that at all. Compound interest works best if you are investing on a monthly basis. If you're not, you've invested a lump sum of money, leave it. Don't sell it. Don't reinvest it. If you're selling your gains, essentially you're crystallizing your profits, putting it back in at probably a higher price if the markets haven't trailed off. It's a whole lot of work. Literally, if you've got a lump sum in there, just let it ride. Over time, that compounding effect will take care of itself. So just leave your money in there, let it ride. You don't need to do anything. The compounding effect really is the fact of you've got interest in 2021, in 2022, because your interest has been added onto your original amount. You're also going to be getting interest on the original amount you invested and your interest or return from 2021. That's essentially what compound interest is. And if you're investing on a monthly basis, you can compound that even further with pound cost averaging. So please don't sell your gains and reinvest, because you're potentially going to be picking up, you're going to be eroding your own gains if you do that potentially. What's your thoughts on S&P 500 at the moment? 35% of the returns have come from five stocks. That's rather scary, right? Yes, it is, mate. And I was reading something today, or was it yesterday? There were a lot of analysts saying that the S&P 500 potentially could do a minus 20% next year in 2022 because of all of this inflation interest rate kind of like pressures. So it's going to be interesting what happens. But look, with the S&P 500, yes, most of the returns have been from a particular set of companies. So you'll be looking at the likes of Apple, you'll be looking at the likes of Facebook, those big, 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 big companies. The beauty is, because there are 500 companies in that cohort of like businesses that are in this basket, it doesn't matter if Facebook or Apple doesn't return well. The likelihood is that there's going to be another company that will pick up the slack if that were to happen. And this will probably allude to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about on Tuesday's video, is that, even with all of this noise that we're hearing about inflation and interest rates and the QE stopping in America, tapering that back by 30 million opposed to 15 million, and the market's going absolutely nuts because of the uncertainty. If you're going to be investing in businesses right now, I said it last week, blue chip, strong companies. You want businesses that can pass on the cost to consumers, and if by doing so, it's going to have no impact or virtually no impact on their profitability, on their share price, on their bottom line. That can only be found in a select group of companies. Companies that, regardless of what happens in the world, people still need to buy their stuff. It's really, really important. I talk about risk management and foundations all the time. Like, the Shard was not built on sinking sand. The Shard was built on solid, concrete reinforced foundations in order to hold up the weight of the building, right? The same thing applies for your investing. You have to have a strong foundation of solid companies. It's your job, if you're going to be looking at investing and doing it on your own, particularly if you're trying to pick individual stocks, to ensure that you are building your own foundation as solid as possible. If you were in S&P 500, trust me, those businesses aren't going anywhere. Yes, they might have a little bit of a period where they falter, but there's 500 of these companies that are globally renowned, that collectively form the fabric of the necessities of life as a human race. The world needs their products and services. So will 5 companies, if they go bust, completely destroy the S&P 500? No, they won't. Yes, you're going to see a dip in the performance, but the S&P 500 as an index will still be there. And companies fall out of the S&P 500 all the time. If they don't meet the criteria, they get replaced. And there is a very, very high bar in order for people to actually join the S&P 500. Remember how long it took for Tesla to get approved to join the S&P 500? Reporting profits is extremely important as a metric for a company to be considered as an S&P 500. If they fail to continue to report consecutive profits, they fall out of that list. So, it is a very, very strong basket of companies. But yeah, it is scary that a lot of the returns have come from a small collect group of companies. But will that ruin the index if they don't perform, if those select companies don't perform? I don't believe so personally. I feel like it's getting harder and harder for people in their 20s and 30s to get into the property ladder, that you're almost forced into riskier decisions. Mate, you know what, Jack? I completely and utterly agree with you on that one, for sure. And I don't know how long you've been watching the channel for, but I had Gary Stevens on. I've had him on like 2 or 3 times on the channel, and we spoke about this. It feels as though, look at the reality of where we are, right? Like, property prices are increasing, interest rates are absolutely shocking right now. Wage growth is virtually non-existent. If you have got any wage growth recently, that's been completely and utterly taken up by inflation. So you're constantly fighting this battle of we've had a generation of baby boomers who, and everything is relative, right? These guys were able to buy properties at 18,000, 20,000 pounds in value back then, which is a lot of money because everything is relative, right? Now, if you go and sell these properties, you're going to sell them for, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, right? And the reality is that in today's age, where you have soaring property prices because of the whole supply versus demand equation, low wage growth, what have you got to do to get on the property ladder? Like, I'm very fortunate. I was working in Canary Wharf. I worked my butt off in order to be able to afford the deposit for the property that I'm in right now. Like, and for people who don't come from a wealthy background, it's really freaking hard. And I know that because my parents couldn't help me. They couldn't help me. They're poor. So for the longest time, I was like, how on earth am I going to be able to get onto the property ladder? How am I going to be able to do that? I had friends whose family would give them, deposits and buy them cars. And I'm like, I'm never going to be able to get that. And I was very, very lucky that I got myself into a position where I could earn a lot of money in order to be able to get on the property ladder to begin with. But I completely understand what you're saying, mate. It's like work at the moment doesn't work. Like, just going to work in a normal job doesn't feel like it's going to work. It just doesn't work because you can't earn enough money to simply just freaking live. It's hard, mate. And Gary talks a lot about taxation and taxing the wealthy. You get into a whole different cauldron of a conversation there. I mean, how is it that through COVID, the wealthiest families in the country and in the world were able to increase their net worth by billions upon billions of pounds and pay no tax? How is that right? You talk about social mobility, right? How can you go from lower class to middle class to upper class and run through those those stratospheres, the stratas, those layers of society. And frankly, earning money and being able to acquire assets is the key proponent. It is the key catalyst to enable people to be able to move through these social structures and through social classes. But if you can't go to a job, work, earn a good wage, and actually get on the property ladder, start to invest and acquire assets, what do you then do? And you're right, people have to take riskier decisions and do riskier things because the normal things don't work anymore. And I don't have the answers for it, mate, but I completely and utterly agree with you on that. Absolutely. Let's see what else we've got here. One second. I died working my dead end job, Vicky saying right there. Right, let me just do this one quickly. One second. Okay, that's better. Um, Making tax simple. How's it going? Yeah, and you're just saying exactly what I've just kind of said there, Jack. Everyone's sensible they'll keep your deposit in cash, but with house prices going up as they are, you lose so much not being invested. What are your thoughts? Very, very true. Look, it's really, really hard. And I had this conversation with someone the other day, and he was lucky enough to have quite an amount of money set aside, and he was postponing, like getting on the property ladder. And I said, the danger that you have here is that if you postpone, property prices go up 4 or 5% next year, your deposit becomes bigger because property prices have moved. And you're in a very unique position where you have cash to do it right now. So, in opposed to waiting to get a bigger deposit to lower your loan to value, you're constantly battling the market prices of these properties, which you have no control over. And therefore, you'll constantly find yourself pushing things forward and constantly moving the goalpost. And in the end, we kind of talked about, what does it look like if you get on the property ladder now? But you're right. For many people that I speak to, certainly when I do coaching, it's like, okay, well, if I don't invest it right now, or if it's not invested in the stock market, the market does, property market does 5 or 4 or 5%, increase, then I've got to find more of a deposit. And it's a really, really tricky one to 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 solve. And yes, you get help with lifetime ISAs, £4,000, you get £1,000 free from the government. But actually, that £4,000 doesn't go a long way when you need a deposit of 20 grand. I've got a friend at the moment looking to buy a place somewhere in Tunbridge Wells. For a family of 4 kids, property prices down there is 600 grand is what he needs for a house to house his family. That means a 10% deposit. That's £60,000. It's absolutely insane. It's nuts. The normal does not work, and he runs a business. He runs a very, very successful business as well. And like, just think about that. The reality we're facing right now, it's nuts. It really, really is. And I don't have the answers to it, mate. Just don't. Thanks, Kirsty. Did catch that as well? Yes, I'll save this so you can actually watch this back too. Um, What's my thoughts on Rita stock that heavily dumped last week? I didn't pay attention to it, if I'm honest. I haven't, it's the first time I heard of it. I don't really follow individual stock news that closely unless it's in my portfolio of individual stocks. I won't really pay attention to it because I'm not actively looking at opportunities or specific individual stocks to go and buy on a discount. It's not the way I invest. I take a core satellite approach, and most of my money is in index funds and ETFs. That's just how I like to invest. So it's not something that I would have tracked, but I'm just trying to bring up the chart for it now just to see what happened. But DocuSign dumped really, really badly week before last, like really badly, like $99 in one afternoon. That's horrific. Like, imagine holding a load of money in that and seeing that kind of drop. I mean, that is enough to give people a heart attack. Now I'm looking at the candlestick on this right now. When was this? This was the 5th of December. Yeah, so this is last week. I mean, what did that took a dump from $72 down to 20, 20, what's that, $26? It's a big dump, really, really big dump. But I've not been following that to be able to give you kind of any analysis to why that has essentially happened. They are pharmaceuticals though, so I don't know. Were they relying on FDA approval for a drug or something? Who knows? I don't know, man. I couldn't really give you a coherent or informative view on that at the moment, unfortunately. Ace, my dude, how you doing? Very, very true, man. Um, Thoughts on Scottish Mortgage Investment Trust for long-term investment? I mean, they're a good company. I don't hold any of it myself, but I know that they do have a really good track record and stuff. It's just not something that I've actually actively looked at for my own investments or anything really that I've put in portfolios for people before. So I can't really give a real good in-depth thought without really having a good look at them. Is the whole market rigged? You know what? Sometimes it does feel like that, and like to I can't sit here and say sometimes these hedge funds and professional traders don't play the markets because they absolutely do. There's an SEC investigation that's being kicked off at the moment, which talks about how people, traders, hedge funds release negative news about a company, release it as research, but as they release it, they're buying up short positions against the company, knowing that the research and the news that they're going to put out will tank the company stock price. That kind of stuff happens all the time because at the end of the day, we have a financial services industry which is basically born on traders actively seeking ways to make money off the markets. And in order to do so, you are relying on percentage point moves or you know um, price action moves of stock prices, companies. And sometimes if they, and don't get me wrong, like these companies, like they're no joke. Like they have floors and floors of analysts doing research on stuff. And if they come across anything where they think, this is an opportunity, mate, they're on it. They are on it. It's cutthroat out there. And trust me, these traders make a lot of money if they're right. And so, is it rigged? It feels like it sometimes. Look, if you look back at the GameStop AMC saga, like in the States, Robinhood, right? Yeah, like they shut down, trade didn't allow people to trade and all that kind of stuff. But these guys are actively selling. They're actively selling the market data to the hedge funds. And this is the thing that frustrated me back then. It's like everyone's saying, hold, hold, hold. We're going up against these hedge funds. No, you're not, mate. Like every single trade that you placed with Robinhood, if you were in the States, would have been sold to the hedge funds who would have found a way to take an opposite position to hedge their position. Some people will say that this is corrupt. And I think corrupt is an ample word, but inadequate in some ways to be able to describe what actually happens on a day-to-day basis in the markets. So it can feel like it's rigged a lot of the time, but that's just the reality of how the markets have operated for a very, very long time, because it does line the line the pockets of the people who are in the right rooms in the right places at the right time. This is a really good question. How to deal with emotion with while making loss, mate. Listen, it's going to take practice and unfortunately a lot of people who started investing over maybe the last 18 or 24 months, right, they wouldn't have been aware of how the markets can dump like really, really badly and like over a sustained period of time. Like we've been on a massive, massive bull run, massive, for years now. And if this market correction is the one that everyone is saying will arrive, then look, we could be seeing the market's downturn for the next 5 years, may not recover for the next 5 years. And how you deal with the emotional side to making or a loss and looking at losses on your investment chart has to be steeped and anchored in the whole reason why you began this in the first place. And that's why this is why I do not make 10x, 5x, 100x kind of like videos. Because if that is your primary goal for investing, when things dump and you're holding a loss, you didn't have the right mindset when you came in. And if you are only chasing the profits, only chasing the returns, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So it has to be anchored in, what did you do this for? Was it for X reason? Right. Money that I can access in 10, 15 years' time for retirement, for a house deposit in X amount of years' time. Whatever that is, you have to have real clarity around what that is. And when the markets are down, just remember why you did it. Now, that in itself isn't necessarily the silver bullet that is going to solve everything and give you all the comfort that you need. Yes, you might know, right, okay, I'm investing for this purpose, but this is where having a structured and plans into it. And this is people often will miss because it's boring, it's not sexy, it's stuff that people don't want to hear about. But if you have a goal, you then need to figure out, how are you going to invest to get there? Like, Usain Bolt didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be the fastest man on the planet. That was, he had a goal. I want to win a gold medal at the Olympics, and I'm going to train every single day to make incremental improvements to my running time to get me that gold medal. He just happened to be, as a byproduct of that, the fastest man on the planet. Now, his plan on making his incremental increases to get him to that gold medal is really what matters most. It's the things that you do, the things that you buy, specifically when you're investing, how you invest, how long you invest for. Those are the key things. Now, if you're investing, and this is, again, this is not sexy to talk about, and people are more than happy to talk about market crash and buy this and buy that and all this kind of stuff. But I have to reiterate to people, if you're investing for 2-3 years, you need to be taking as little risk as possible, because if the market dumps, you haven't got enough time to wait for the tide to recover itself. So long term is really, really important. But simple answer to this, mate, you're never going to feel 100% about seeing a loss on your account. Even now, when I see a loss, I'm like, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But you become accustomed to it. And you have to remember why you're investing. If you're investing for the long term, all of this stuff is inconsequential. It doesn't really matter. It's like a bump in the road. You're on a 100-mile journey, and I don't know, 2 miles in, you hit a pothole. But the vehicle's still completely fine. It's still going to get you to your destination. It makes no difference at all. It is going to be about regulating it with your goals and having confidence in your plan and your strategy. If you can wrap that up into a nicely packaged kind of like deal that you've got written down, you just reference back to that and just remember why you're in it in the first place. What's your opinion like stocks like Himax, where the fundamentals of the business are solid and it's profitable, but apparently heavily shorted? I don't know the company itself, but if the fundamentals of the business are solid, then that is an important metric to basically hang your hat on. Because ultimately, look, there were always going to be people who are going to short a company. People have been shorting Tesla for years. People have been shorting a ton of companies for years. The short sellers are those guys who basically do some analysis and they think they find a chink in the armor of a particular company's business model or a particular company's plans. And they think, well, if all of these things happen, then the share price is going south. That shouldn't be well, it can be in some ways, definitely something for you to consider as to, is this a good buy or not? But ultimately, if the fundamentals stack up, the financials are solid, they do have a strategic advantage, and it feels as though the company is making strides into the future. Yes, consider the fact that it's heavily shorted, but ask yourself, do you think it's still a good business? What you might decide to do is you might just say, actually, you know what, if I was going to put 5 grand into this, I might only put something like 2 grand to mitigate your risk. But yeah, don't let the short selling side to it be an absolute deterrent, because it's not the full picture a lot of the time. If you're doing research on a company, it is all about what they're doing, their competition, how strong they are as a business, how viable they are as a business, and their future prospects. They're always going to be short sellers, mate. So don't let it deter you. Do you have an opinion on whether it's better to fill a stocks and shares ISA with index funds and using your general investment account for individual stocks versus the other way around? I would say that you should always use your stocks and shares ISA for, well, you should always use your stocks and shares ISA first to the maximum amount. So whether you can only put ETFs and index funds in your stocks and shares ISA, you do that first before you double into the individual stocks in a general investment account. Because the first rule of financial planning is tax efficiency first. So if you've got a £20,000 allowance and you only got £10,000 in your stocks and shares ISA, right, which is in an index fund, but you've then got another £10,000 in individual stocks, well, some may say that that is counterintuitive because whilst you might make greater profits on the individual stock side, you're going to have to pay tax on that. And that might be a compromise that you're willing to make. But from a tax efficiency point of view, it would make sense to use your full allowance in your stocks and shares ISA first. Even better if you can hold individual stocks and ETFs within the same ISA account. You can't do that a lot of times. You could have done it with Trading 212 if you have an account. You can do it to a certain degree with free trade. Obviously, you may not have access to all of the ETFs available, European markets, maybe, for example. You just need to make sure that you're selecting your provider correctly in order to take full advantage. So, for example, even with Hargreaves Lansdown, you'll be able to use individual stocks and ETFs and index funds, but you've got to pay additional fees. So your provider selection is going to be very, very important. But use and fill up your ISA first before you go into a general investment account. Yes, it is. But the question is, where are you going to store the physical gold and silver, and how are you going to plan on actually getting rid of it as well? Because you've got to remember, if you're buying physical gold or silver, you are also going to have fees as well associated with trying to dispose it. Whereas if you bought, say, like you've got physical gold ETF, that's easy to buy, easy to sell, and you haven't got to worry about storage of it either. I mean, imagine if you buy a lot of gold or silver bars and your house burns down, or you get burgled. What you got then? So it is a good hedge, but think about how you're going to access it. Thank you very much for that, mate. Thank you for tuning in. I'm just looking at the time. We're an hour and a half in. This is my last live for the year. Let me just see what else we've. Okay, there's quite a few comments here, to be fair. I apologize, guys, but I probably won't be able to get to all of these because, yeah, we're an hour and a half in right now. And it's 5 o'clock on a Sunday. And I've got an early start tomorrow morning. Let me see if I can take maybe one or two more and call it a night from there. Where was I? I've lost where I was before. Okay, I'm going to answer this one on crypto. So listen, if you're trading, this is very, very different to investing in crypto. I mean, if you're trading crypto, it's a completely different kettle of fish, mate. If you don't understand trading, stay far away from it. Far away from it. But if you just want to buy a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of Ethereum, you can definitely buy and just hold them. You don't have to worry about pairs if you do that. But please be careful, mate. Kraken and the trading facilities in there is trading. You can do yourself like real harm if you don't know what you're doing, particularly if you don't understand what the pairs are. If you want to buy some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, maybe some Cardano, or I don't know, some basic attention token, then you can do that on Kraken. Maybe have a look at the likes of eToro because it's way, way simpler, or Coinbase, for example, because it's way, way simpler, or crypto.com because it's way, way simpler if you want to just buy and hold them. But trading is a different kettle of fish. So please, please, please be careful with it, mate. I don't trade, so I can't really give you any insights into what's best to do on Kraken in that regard. All right, let me just find one more. Apologies, guys, if I don't get to your questions. There's a conversation in here about Dave Ramsey. Very, very good. Olivia's just saying here, tell us about your investment course. The investment course is literally just for beginners. It takes you through all the basic stuff. It takes you through kind of like investor psychology, the importance of goals, how to mentally deal with that downside of risk. It takes you through some really basic stuff like time horizon, like the length of time you're investing for, the appropriate level of risk that you should be taking. It takes you through things like asset allocation and asset classes. That's a little bit of jargon, but if you are looking at investing with anyone, they'll be talking about asset classes, asset allocation. How is your portfolio built? How much of your money do you have in a particular asset? Is it stocks? Is it property? Is it cash? Is it bonds? It goes through all of that kind of stuff in very, very simple layman's terms. It takes you through the difference between investing in individual stocks and investing in index funds and ETFs, those kind of things. It tells you how to actually vet a provider so that you're not going to potentially put your money with a company that could be a fraudulent company, run away with your money, how you do due diligence. It covers all that kind of stuff, really. The full syllabus is available on my website, conversationofmoney.com. If you go to the tab course, it takes you through the entire thing. You can finish the course in probably about 94 minutes. It gives you a few tests and stuff like that. It's on there for $59.99 plus VAT, so I think it's like £70, something like that, inclusive of VAT. But you get access to Discord. You can ask me questions in the follow-up to it as well. It's really, really self-explanatory, but it will give you the basic foundations that you actually need as a first-time investor. Let's have a look. I need one more. I'm just scanning, see if there's just one in here that piques my interest to actually ask. Okay. I thought I saw one in there. Okay, let me take this one from Adrian. All right, so what's a good platform for stock investment so they won't go bankrupt with all the money invested in them? Look, any company can go bankrupt. That's just a fact. It's just a reality. If you are investing in the UK, then you do have things like the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, which give you protection up to £85,000. But if you are looking at a company that you can invest in, look, your selection criteria for apps and for businesses, if you're worried about this kind of stuff, is the size of the business. So Vanguard is probably the biggest out there. They manage trillions of pounds for people. Are they going to disappear due to bankruptcy? No, not nowhere near. I mean, unless something like 2007, 2008 happens again, there may be, but they have a lot of cash. They generate a lot of cash. They look after a lot of cash with people. So people like them are very unlikely to go bust. But there's a whole host of them, mate. Vanguard, Hargreaves Lansdown, BlackRock, Fidelity. There are so many that you could literally go and find. I think it really depends on, how you want to invest and element of how much do you want to pay. Vanguard is very, very cheap compared to people like, Hargreaves Lansdown, for example. They may be a little bit more expensive than, Hargreaves Lansdown might be a little bit expensive more than people like BlackRock or Fidelity, for example. So it really depends on where you want to go. But, you will have some protection as an investor, as a consumer anyway, within the space under the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. But maybe if you're worried about that, look for big legacy companies that have been around for a very long time, like Vanguard and Hargreaves Lansdown and BlackRock and people of that ilk. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. So this is the last live for 2021. Whatever you do for Christmas, make sure that you keep safe and have a good time. Try to relax and everything. If you haven't subscribed to the new newsletter that I'll have coming out in the new year, if you go to my website, conversationofmoney.com, you can subscribe to it right there. It is going to be a bi-monthly, every 2 weeks. There's a lot going on at the moment. I've toyed around with doing it for a week, and I don't think I'll be able to pull that off. So every 2 weeks feels about right. We'll be covering stock news, crypto news, personal finance, jargon busting, what the professionals buy. There's a lot of stuff that will be in there. And it's going to be very different to your typical newsletters in format and just in feel. So if you haven't subscribed to that, consider subscribing to it, conversationofmoney.com. It will be in the top banner. Literally just subscribe there. It's going to be called The Convo. So the Conversation of Money, The Convo, is the newsletter. But guys, have an amazing Christmas. Have an amazing New Year's as well. I will see you again in January on lives. There'll be a video this Tuesday, this Friday. After that, it's probably going to be radio silence as I kind of put my feet up for the New Year's. But I appreciate every single one of you for your support this year. Thank you so, so much. Thank you for all the comments, all of the likes, all of the views, all the support. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you. And hopefully I've been able to help you on your journey as well. Have a good evening. Have a good week, whatever it is that you do.